Hey everyone, Scott here. I'm back with this New English Bible and these Mickey Mouse gloves, unfortunately. But yeah, I showed you this in my last video, and after doing so, I read the letter to the Colossians in this translation, and there were some things that jumped out that I thought, hey, that would make a good video. Let's talk about that. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to share three verses and why they jumped out to me in this particular translation, and a little bit about what I learned as I was looking into it. So let's do that. We're going to start with chapter 2, verse 4. So here Paul has been writing to the Colossians about Jesus and trying to give them right teaching. And he explains that the reason he's done this is, I tell you this to save you from being talked into error by specious arguments. Now, I'm going to be honest, I am not a scholar. I've told you before, I'm no dummy, but I'm not like a real smart guy. So I thought, okay, I know that word spacious. I've seen it before. I'm not well familiar with it, so I looked it up. Okay, and that's how you learn words and build your vocabulary, right? So you look up spacious. It's like something that's superficially plausible but wrong. That was one definition I saw. Or you might just simply say it's misleading. So the idea is, it's not just that it's wrong or that it's plausible or sounds kind of good. It's that it's both. It kind of sounds good and you're like, oh, that might be, but it is actually wrong. That's kind of the feeling of the word spacious. So it just jumped out at me, right? And that's one of the things I like about this translation, is that I pick up some words, I learn some vocabulary, and it makes me think about what's being said here. I was looking, and actually, if you look at the RSV, it has beguiling speech, which gives you the same sense, and you get something very similar from the King James. So I like that this kind of has that similar sort of language. Some modern translations, of course, they're trying to use words that are more familiar to us, simplifying the English. I feel like maybe something gets lost there. The NASB has persuasive arguments, which, I mean, that gets like part of the meaning of spacious or beguiling, but not all of it really. The CSB, which I've been reading a lot lately, arguments that sound reasonable, which again, that kind of gets at it. I think it kind of implies they sound reasonable, which is to say they're not actually right. It's also kind of a mouthful, maybe a little clumsy. I think spacious arguments is just much more. It's much nicer. It's succinct. I really like that. So now I don't know what the underlying Greek. I can't get into that. So I'm going off English translations, but yeah, I thought the NEB did a nice job there. Next verse I want to look at, oh, I turned the page, look at that, is chapter 3, verse 8, which is, where is chapter 3? So there it is. One of the things about this format of the NEB is it is sometimes a little challenging to find the chapter and verse you want because of the layout. So in chapter 3, Paul is calling them to put to death those parts of you which belong to the earth. And the first group is like fornication, indecency, lust, foul cravings, ruthless greed, kind of like sexual sins, those sorts of things. And then the second group has anger, passion, malice, cursing, and filthy talk, or what Wiersbe calls the social sins. And in the NEB, it adds here, have done with them. Now, that phrase really jumped out at me, of course, because that's not a phrase I've heard before. I understand what it means, but hearing it said like that, have done with them, really jumped out on the page. And yeah, it just added a lot of emphasis to that. But here's the thing. I've looked at a few different translations, and it seems to me this is something that the NEB added. If you look at just about all other English translations, it says to lay aside or to remove from yourself or something like that, all these different things, and then that's the end of the sentence. So it seems they added on here, which, yeah, that's a little kind of, adding things like that. Is it a paraphrase? Is it adding on to the Word of God? We could have a whole discussion on that, but um, I'll say I don't think it changes the meaning in any way. So it's not changing the meaning. I think it's pretty safe, but I would still, it wouldn't be something I would do if I was translating. The REB follows the same kind of thing. It says instead, though, banish them all from your lips. I guess the best thing I could say is, we should treat this maybe like a commentary, having this little addition here. I mentioned Wiersbe. He noted in his commentary, it's the B series commentary that he did, that this, he said this deserves some emphasis, these sins, because we tend to be kind of okay with them, these social sins. As he pointed out, if someone at your church was accused of fornication or, lust, or they were cheating on their spouse or something like that, like we would be, very concerned that sort of thing was going on and would view that very negatively. We are not so careful about how we view like anger and cursing, filthy talk. We might be a little more okay with that, or we might say, well, they had a right to be angry, or so maybe it does deserve a little emphasis, but I guess view that like a commentary. Again, I don't know the underlying Greek to know how safe or wise it was to do this, but it seems from looking at other English translations that it's not original. So it definitely does draw attention to the verse, though. All right. The last one I'm going to look at is chapter 4, verse 6. So here, we'll start actually at verse 5. Paul writes, behave wisely towards those outside your own number. Use the present opportunity to the full. Let your conversation be always gracious and never insipid. Study how best to talk with each person you meet. Okay, again, insipid. Had heard that word? Kind of had an idea what it might mean, but okay, I better look it up and be sure, right? Right, so I did. And, if we look up insipid, it's, well, first let's talk about what's actually in the underlying Greek. What's literally there and what is in most English translations is seasoned with salt. So it's saying, let your speech be seasoned with salt. And the NEB and the REB as well have never insipid. So what does that mean? Well, insipid is lacking vigor or interest, or, it's dull or boring. Or if you're talking about food, it would be lacking flavor. If you said the food at the hospital was insipid, or this insipid meal, something like that. So, in the NEB, REB as well, we're getting that our conversation, it needs to not be dull or boring. We need to keep people's interest. Now, in terms of insipid being the right meaning for seasoned with salt, I did see several commentaries that I think would agree with that. Tom Wright wrote in the Tyndale New Testament commentary that Paul knows that a tedious monologue is worse than useless in evangelism. Obviously, that hits it right on the head. At the same time, I did see some other suggestions as to what it might mean. The Reformation Study Bible said, it points out that salt prevents spoilage of meat. And, as such, our speech and our lives must promote purity and not corruption. So they kind of viewed it in terms of, the seasoning of salt, maintaining purity. So, this is a situation where going away from a word-for-word translation means a choice is made and another choice is set aside. So using insipid, is making a decision about what that means. And from what I've seen, most translations avoid that. They simply include seasoned with salt, and there's something to be said for that. It gives Christians, those reading the Bible, the opportunity to think about it and research it and learn for themselves what that phrase might mean. But there are some other translations that similarly paraphrase it. The NLT has attractive. Let your conversation be attractive. So I think never insipid. It's a little bit kind of cooler than just attractive. But again, this is a translation that is going to maybe make some of us run to the dictionary. I know it has for me. Anyways, that's all I got. I just wanted to share those 3 verses. I thought it was interesting and thought you might find it interesting. So I hope you did. If you did, please give me a like. And if you have anything you'd like to share or anything you want to say about these verses, please share it in the comments below. As always, I thank you for watching. God bless, and we'll see you for the next one.